Get started. So you run an online payment service that facilitates transactions for some of the biggest online services out there. We're talking Airbnb, we're talking Uber, Dropbox.
Yep.
But consumers don't know too much about Braintree because you really work in the background. So can you give us a sense of scale for how big Braintree is?
Sure, yeah. I mean, as you mentioned, we work with most of the best sort of next-gen commerce experiences, many of the best mobile apps out there run on our platform. You name some of them, there's thousands of others that use our platform. Here in Europe, Angry Birds and Minecraft and Halo Cab and lots of great ones here in Europe as well. And so at the time that PayPal acquired Braintree almost a year ago, our last public numbers, we were doing 14 billion in annual volume. We just recently said that our transactions have nearly tripled in the last year, so still growing quite quickly.
And so you're among the top apps. We're looking at the App Store, see the top 10.
Yeah, generally we'll have sort of the top 2, 3, 4 apps in almost every category in the App Store, and a big part of the reason for that is that sort of the premise that we had with Braintree going back 3, 4 years ago was that mobile payments would really be more about e-commerce on the mobile device first, and then would move to the physical world second after that. And at the time, that sounded like a bit of a crazy thing because we were saying, hey, mobile would be a primary computing device, and that most e-commerce would happen there, which now, that's starting to become somewhat evident. 4 years ago, it sounded pretty crazy, and so we were building for this really before anybody else was doing so. And so many of these great mobile apps, 3, 4 years ago, there really wasn't any other choice for that. And then we've built out a ton since then that we democratized access to one-touch purchasing. We built the very first one-touch mobile payment solution with Venmo Touch. And now it's part of PayPal doing the same thing inside of PayPal. Being
mobile first, you can't really overemphasize how important that was. And we had Michael Acton-Smith on stage yesterday from Mind Candy talking about how they didn't put enough investment and resources into designing for mobile, and it hurt the business, and he's admitting that now.
Yeah.
Whereas you got in early with the likes of some of the biggest mobile players out there now.
Yep.
And going back to the question of scale, I mean, how many credit cards do you have on file?
So we handle single-click or repeat purchasing for more than 80 million consumers now.
80 million
Just Braintree on its own, separate from PayPal. PayPal, of course, has 150 million plus users, but Braintree on its own, more than 80 million, almost 85 million.
So give us a sense of, there's another name out there that people are talking about a lot that's very hot in mobile commerce right now, which is Stripe. And there's a few others kind of orbiting that area as well. What makes you better than those competitors?
Well, I think a couple things that have made us different than sort of really anybody in the space. One is that we bet on mobile before anybody else did. We've built a lot of things around delivering great service along with great technology. So we built, we gave really easy access to sophisticated payment tools for developers and startups. But in addition to that, we paired that with great customer service, something that is oftentimes overlooked amongst tech companies. You think you can sort of automate everything away, but we paired that great technology up with white glove customer service.
And you have an underwriting. There's a credit facility and an underwriting facility for your merchants as well.
That's right. One of the things that people oftentimes don't appreciate about payments is that you're effectively sort of providing a line of credit to a business. And so one of the things that had been historically true in the world of payments is it was really hard to get access to even basic payments tools, not just from the technical perspective, but from the, what did it take to register your business? And so like here in Europe, for example, it's very common that you'd be asked to come into a physical bank branch, show your passport, show lots of physical documentation, all these kinds of things.
Ton of due diligence.
Yeah, and so we've done a lot to make that much more seamless, get it to far less information. And one of the things that we're actually announcing here today is that we have significantly revamped yet again our sign-up process to literally get it down to an email address, a website, and a few words about your business, and you're up and running in literally a few minutes, including the code integration. So we think the very fastest in the industry to get up and running on payments.
Fast, but also I'm really interested in the underwriting component. Tell us about how many people are on your underwriting team, and what their background is?
Yeah, I mean, so we're, overall, we're sort of approaching almost 400 people across Braintree. We have sort of 20 or 30 or so that work on sort of risk and underwriting, these kinds of things. But yeah, the people that we have working on that are much more thinking about sort of algorithms and sort of non-traditional uses of data.
So they're data scientists.
That's
they're
right,
not
yeah.
underwriters. And they don't come from the traditional world of banking.
Most
the people
don't.
that you're disrupting, the JP Morgans and the Bank of America,
That's
totally
right.
different world.
That's right. Well, one of the things that we found, and part of why it was so hard for startups to get access to these things, is that sort of the traditional data elements of like, well, how has your business been doing for the last several years? What does your balance sheet look like? These are all inaccurate predictors of how well a startup's going to do.
And better predictors, better data points?
So,
what's your secret sauce?
Obviously, we don't talk too much about that. Part of what you're trying to prevent is sort of fraud as well, and so we don't give away the cookbook for a fraudster to come defraud us. But there's a lot of things that we think it's more important to assess, sort of what's the business model, how's service being delivered. All those things we think are more important than do you have 10 years of financial history.
Okay.
So.
I'd love to talk a little bit about another service that you bought called Venmo a couple of years ago for something like $26 million,
That's right.
which really seems like a steal now, because in the States, pretty much a ton of smartphone users under the age of 30, 25 are using Venmo to split the bill at restaurants, to split utility bills, to split rent. And what's kind of funny about it is they're sharing about who they're paying, how much they're paying, and what for on these news feeds.
That's right.
Tell us about how big Venmo is. Can you give us a sense of scale?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we just released Venmo's Q3 numbers, and they did $700 million in volume in Q3, which if you annualize that, $2.8 billion annually.
Okay, so almost $3 billion.
Yeah, so if you think about sort of how many native mobile apps out there have nearly $3 billion in volume flowing through them, you probably don't need all your fingers to even count that.
So how many active users is
we
that?
We don't give an active user count, but as you can imagine, at nearly $3 billion in volume, it's pretty substantial.
We're talking single-digit millions active users?
We don't publish a user count. Given that we're part of a public company now, like pretty stiff penalties for me if I start to disclose things outside of sort of quarterly results. But at 2.8 billion, like literally, you don't even need all your fingers to count the number of mobile apps in the world that would have that. But you were asking earlier about how are we different? It's a big part of how we're different as well, that as we were looking at how would mobile commerce evolve, we felt that having a direct relationship with the consumer was really important to deliver the kind of low friction buying experiences that consumers are going to demand on mobile. So we started out democratizing single-click purchasing for startups and developers that had previously been the exclusive domain of sort of only the largest e-commerce companies. But then we said, well, hey, we've democratized access to that. In a mobile world, though, even sort of registering the first time, even if you get your repeat purchases seamlessly, even registering the first time is still really difficult. And so we felt like having a direct relationship with the consumer was really important. So that's why we acquired Venmo. And Venmo, when we bought it, was a few thousand users, very, very small, just out of beta.
Oh, really?
And it was around P2P and had social. And so P2P we felt was a really right early use case for mobile.
And
but
nobody was doing it, but I mean, people were doing it and failing terribly.
Yeah,
with
people were
social
doing it,
commerce.
but nobody was really doing it sort of focused on mobile. And certainly the social element was what is unique as well. So we built a bunch on social.
Can I just give an example of how Venmo works, because it doesn't. It's only usable in the U.S.
Right now, yes.
I took a look at some screenshots online, and it's basically a feed of who you're paying and an amount sometimes, and it'll say what you're paying for. So it'll say tacos, Chewy pizza, concert tickets, July rent, and there's some cryptic ones like onions hurt my eyes. And so it becomes this almost kind of social.
Yeah, interestingly enough, so we never publish the amounts. The amount's not published.
Okay.
The users provide their own descriptions, so the user's always in complete control of what they share. So they put a description and they choose the audience. Is it just their friends, or is it completely public, sort of like a Twitter feed would be? But no, one of the things that we found is that there was a natural conversation happening around these person-to-person payments, whether it was sort of splitting the tab at dinner, or a night of drinks with friends, or the World Cup pool that you're in at the office. There's a natural conversation happening around these payments, and so facilitating that really is, I think, one of the first meaningful successes in social commerce, that people were willing to do that because there's a natural conversation there. People ask, well, hey, where can that go? And I think there's a lot of opportunity for where social commerce can go, and sort of the narrative a few years ago was that social commerce had failed. And so at that time, it was a very bold bet to say we were going to do that. But I think what we got right that didn't exist other places was saying, we'll provide a social element to a commerce transaction where there's a natural conversation, right? And facilitate that versus trying to force a conversation around a financial transaction where a conversation didn't exist. And so that's worked really well, and we think there's a lot of future potential in that. So
looking to the future of Venmo, when is it coming to another country outside the US?
So we haven't announced sort of anything outside the U.S. just yet. We did meaningfully expand what Venmo's doing from P2P to also include the industry's very first one-touch mobile payments. And so in a number of apps, Hotel Tonight, Living Social, TaskRabbit, YPlan, lots of others, you can use Venmo for one-touch mobile purchases. We then expanded that to PayPal users. So across PayPal, you can now have a one-touch mobile buying experience as a PayPal user using that same technology that we built with Venmo. So we expanded that out quite a bit.
So just the feature set, but as far as going to other countries, would that even happen next year in 2015?
We haven't announced a date for that yet. We get a lot of demand for that. At some point, we'll look at it. The one-touch payments with PayPal, that piece of it, that one-touch buying technology we built with Venmo and incorporated into PayPal, we're bringing that to Europe over the sort of next couple months. So that will be coming very soon to Europe.
What about the extending what you're doing with PayPal, the credit facility, also through Braintree, to Venmo users? So the students who are using it to split the bill can also use Venmo maybe one day to borrow money if they need it to pay their rent. And you've got these amazing data scientists, underwriters, who can extract all the information from their news feed to see if they're subprime or not.
Well, I think it's an interesting idea. We're not doing anything with credit within Venmo. Within PayPal, our PayPal has PayPal credit. And so, we think that credit is part of a complete wallet offering to a consumer. We're not doing anything with Venmo yet. You mentioned another part of this, like, would you use the news feed for that? And I think one of the premises that we have always had is that, particularly in the world of payments, where what you're really trying to do is create connections between consumers and merchants, you get the right to facilitate that connection if you do things that are good for both the consumer and the merchant. If you serve either one of those at the detriment of the other, you'll lose out. And a lot of failures in the world of payments have come from that you're serving one side of the network but not the other. And so that example you just gave of, would you use the news feed to go underwrite a user, things like that, I think while we're not doing anything with that today, the principles that we would follow are always that it's got to be something that's great for the consumer, great for the merchant, and both sides agree that it's a good thing.
They have to be okay with it. They can't freak out.
The consumers have to be okay with it and say, hey, this helps me with something that I want to do. We'd never do something that's sort of good for the merchant but not good for the consumer, or vice versa.
So it sounds like that might be something that, because you said the word yet and credit facility and Venmo.
Well,
so
again,
I'm thinking
it's a meaningful part of PayPal. PayPal credit is, I think, one of the more unique things that PayPal can offer is that while PayPal's an open wallet and you can use cards and non-card instruments, credit facility is also an interesting part of that. So part of us becoming part of the PayPal family was us accelerating our growth around the world, giving easier access to the tools that PayPal has through the Braintree developer tools and those kinds of things. So categorically, we're trying to make those tools within PayPal more accessible, and so there's a lot of those that we'll be trying to open up for others to build on top of.
Cross-pollination of features, we'll see it happen elsewhere. So talking of PayPal, spin-off from eBay happening next year. That's exciting for you.
Absolutely,
I imagine less bureaucracy, trying to get things done, trying to buy more companies. Should PayPal buy Stripe?
Well, within Braintree, we're offering a set of services, I think, that are broader than really any other player out there. As you look at Braintree being sort of not only a great developer platform, but also a great relationship with the consumer, things like that. So, PayPal's always been an acquisitive company. I think an acquisition would need to add something beyond what you have already.
Right, and Stripe has been valued at $2 billion most recent, well, back in January, almost 2.
Yeah, I haven't kept up with the latest. But again, I think we'd look for things that would be additive versus, sort of similar to things that we have already. But I think PayPal, as a separate entity, I think will be really exciting. I think it's also indicative of, just how exciting this space is now. That 4 years ago, when I was talking about, hey, mobile is going to be, where most of e-commerce happens. It's going to be a primary computing platform. It sounded, more than a few people told me, it sounded a little bit batshit crazy almost. And now, it's one of the most exciting spaces to be in. And I think, the excitement over PayPal as a separate company is indicative of that.
Okay. To your point, you clearly knew that everything was going mobile. That was a very prescient bet to make. That in mind, would you like to run PayPal?
Well, we just hired a new CEO, and I think John Donahoe, eBay's CEO, who I worked very closely with as we were coming in, I think he made a very good choice in who he brought in, and was thinking very much about just as with John and the board's decision to split eBay and PayPal to make sure that PayPal and eBay are both set up to compete in a rapidly changing environment. I think John thought a lot about that as he made a hire in Dan Schulman from American Express. Really, my premise coming into PayPal was we felt like we had really gotten it right on a number of elements around betting on mobile first, all these kinds of things, and betting on the one-touch buying experience, and we wanted to take that to scale far faster than what we might have independently. And the great thing is that inside of PayPal, we've been able to build a lot of that. We've rolled out one-touch payments to PayPal users in the US and now coming to Europe soon. But it's also the case that sort of this multi-wallet world that we predicted. So as we were thinking about, hey, a one-touch buying experience will be important, you need to deliver that through a wallet, we felt like we would build one because nobody else had built one-touch payments at the time, but we also thought that there would be many others of these. And so we built a platform that supported many wallets, and so that's why when Apple Pay was announced, that we not only said that we would support it at the launch for Apple Pay, 9 or 10 of the logos behind Tim Cook on stage were clients of ours that were getting Apple Pay through Braintree, because we had really built for this years in advance, saying, hey, that's what we think it looks like this will be. We'll build one of these wallets. We think there'll be others. We'll facilitate it easily.
And so whether you're using of digital wallets, because there's so many.
And so whether you're using PayPal for one touch or Venmo for one touch, Apple Pay, Bitcoin, whatever, we're going to be there to facilitate it as we get into this world of a much more streamlined buying experience for consumers on mobile devices.
I'd love to get your opinion on Apple Pay in just a minute, but first, going back to the changes at PayPal. David Marcus, who was previously CEO, left not too long ago to run the messaging services at Facebook. Now that gets a lot of people wondering about what that means for Facebook Messenger, potentially even WhatsApp, though they're very independent. How likely do you think it is that we'll see some kind of money transfer service through Facebook Messenger in 2015?
I can't predict any better than the next person can, or speculate any better than the next person can.
I think you could, actually.
I honestly don't know. I think Facebook has experimented with a number of things. I think they stated that they experiment quite a lot. They've had some other experiments where they built an autofill feature that to fill payment information. We partnered with them on that. That is built on our platform. And so I can't speculate on what they'll build next. We have a great partnership with Facebook, both on the PayPal side as well as the Braintree side. And so we partner with them. Exciting to see them sort of thinking about the space. I can't predict what they'll do next.
Okay. Let's talk about Apple Pay, because when that happened, it got everybody thinking, finally, Apple's come into the game, NFC is really going to happen, we're all going to be paying for things with our mobiles. But then there's been some hiccups along the way with MCX and supposed industry collusion, Rite Aid and CVS and a few other, Walmart, other retailers not taking it. What do you think Apple has done right, and what has it done wrong in introducing Apple Pay?
Well, so obviously, given that we created the first one-touch buying experience, seeing somebody else come with a one-touch buying experience, I think is great validation of, hey, this premise we had of this is really just the way payments should work. I think great to see that validation. I think also great to see another major player come into the space. I think the opportunity around mobile, PayPal did $27 billion in mobile volume last year, more than I think anybody else in the world by far. Yet, mobile's still in its very early innings. So it's the case that you have only about 10% of transactions are e-commerce transactions. So 90% plus are still sort of physical world in-store transactions.
Yeah.
But of the e-commerce transactions, only about 10% of those are mobile. So of the total transactions out there, you have about 1% that are mobile.
Yeah.
And so what I think is really interesting is we've had to believe for a long time that the majority of these should be mobile. Of course, that's what consumers are going to use. And so seeing another player come in to help spur that along, I think is fantastic, and that's why we worked with Apple on Apple Pay. We support it, and we're one of the providers listed, on their developer site. So we've been excited about it.
You don't think they've made any mistakes? This is really just part and parcel of entering still a very nascent field.
I mean, I think it's an exciting launch. I think it's too soon to judge on any of these things. I think it's been an exciting launch. I think people are going to look for, there's sort of all this chatter about sort of which merchants are there, which ones aren't. I think people are going to look for what problems are being solved, and again, things that will succeed are going to be things that solve both consumer and merchant problems, and neither one exclusive of the other. That doesn't solve for one side exclusive of the other. But certainly off to a great start, and we're excited to see Apple join to help propel it along. I think there's huge opportunity in getting that 1% that's mobile now to 50–60%, and we expect that there will be multiple players in this, and so we're excited to work with the other players and really
or maybe buy them.
Any wallet that is relevant to consumers and merchants, we're going to look to go make easily accessible via our checkout experience.
Okay, fantastic. Well, Bill, thank you very much for answering our questions.
Really enjoyed it. Thanks.